I thought I'd try out this argument around your free trade research.
All
Um,
right.
yeah. So, what about putting on trade restrictions when it comes to humanitarian values, such things like preventing, like slave labor or harsh conditions, things of that nature.
If you want to see more content like this, I would really appreciate you liking and subscribing. It really helps with the algorithm. And make sure to check out the Discord and other social links in the description. I feel like the case that you should really be making is that the humanitarian concern justifies the economic cost, and that basically shifts it to like, hey, you have to agree that there's an economic cost here, and that the economic cost is worth the humanitarian benefit. And then two, I think equal exchange generally leads to the best outcome. Like clearly the people working in sweatshops, like their revealed preference is working in sweatshops. Like there can be some coercive forces behind it, but like banning it would just take away their least bad option. Like the conditions in sweatshops are better than the conditions in the like agrarian rural parts of countries. That's why the people are going there to work at sweatshops. I also like free trade basically mechanistically like increases productivity, and that's a large determinant of wages. So like if you engage in free trade and increase the country's productivity, that increases their like average wage level, and that can let them develop faster and move away from the sweatshop era faster. Because like we used to have
Yeah.
sweatshops here, but then we developed enough economically where we don't need them anymore. I think it's more
Yeah.
likely that it happens when
I
countries
want to
engage in
extend
free
on that.
trade.
I
Sure.
want to extend on that for a moment. Yeah, so I totally agree that generally speaking, the more we can grow a country's economy, the better off their society will become because of the overflow of cash down to the poverty line and getting more people out of poverty. However, there's still like a bit of predatory practices that do go on in particular areas. The only example I could really point to is things like China, in the sense that like iPhones get shipped out over there to be, or iPhones are manufactured there, and these big corporations that probably could afford giving them much better wages or much better outcomes are stifled because the outcome they just want more profits. Um, it this probably doesn't fit within the lines of free trade. This is probably more like a penalty we got to put on the corporation itself. But yeah, it's I guess my where I'm trying to line up to is how do we prevent predatory practices without going to restricting trade?
Um, I mean, there's not a super great way to do it because, like, obviously, like telling domestic companies, like, hey, you can't use child labor or whatever. That does amount to some type of trade restriction. I do think a lot of companies, just because of the public relations issues with like using child labor, try to join organizations that try to ensure that like their chocolate bars aren't made with child labor. Um, there could be cases made, like there probably are cases. Like I'm pretty sure China uses like Uyghur slave labor for like cotton or whatever. So you could make an argument there for like tariffing, even tariffing China to try to prevent that. I just don't that I just don't I think in that case the argument you're making is that the humanitarian benefit justifies the economic cost when like a lot of times when I argue with people it just seems like they don't think there's an economic cost.
Yeah, that is essentially the angle that I'm going at. Because I do agree with the idea that if we can have like free trade in the sense that everybody follows the rules properly on the negotiating table, that yes, it's overall better for everyone's economy. However, we just have a lot of countries that don't follow the rules, and they're always trying to find ways to pinch pennies essentially at the cost and expense of their citizens.
What do you mean by
Uh,
don't follow the rules? Do you mean like steal? Like I know China steals intellectual property. I can understand like that
yeah,
argument.
yeah, yeah, that would be a good example. It's I would bring that to the table, but oh, I swear I had an example I thought of and I forgot about as well. And maybe we'll get back to it. Let's talk about the IP for a little bit. Um, do you think that there should be trade restrictions based off of IP? Yeah, like
Um,
if other countries essentially steal IP and manufacture something.
I guess usually I would say trade restrictions kind of, depending on the type of trade restriction, kind of hurt us more than they hurt the other country. So I would like agree, like IP probably needs to be protected generally, and there might need to be some punishments against China if they are stealing IP, which I do think they are doing. But I don't know exactly what those would look like.
Uh,
I think we do have some sanctions on China already, right? Like, don't we?
yeah, we do. It's maybe I could expound upon the detriments to us when it comes to IP being stolen. So you understand that under like IP protections, the idea about it is a company patents something, and that patent is there so they can sell at a higher cost in order to pay back a lot of the research costs that they invest into that product. You understand that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I like pat. Yeah, I'm not
Yes,
totally anti-patent or anything. Yeah, I agree. Yep.
of course. Yeah. So essentially, if IPs get stolen, and China manufactures something as dirt cheap, well, we would want to put a protection on that to make sure that our researchers don't go out of a job and those businesses making the innovations don't disappear.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, like we do. Like I agree. If yeah, where China is stealing IP, there probably needs to be some punishment. It's just that we should try to punish them in the way that least affects us. So that probably wouldn't be tariffing literally everything coming from China or tariffing the entire world,
Yeah.
like Trump wants to do or Trump has talked about doing. At least we'll see if he doesn't. I don't think he'll end up tariffing everybody, but
Yeah, well, ultimately, I think that once he starts proposing these tariffs, there's going to be a lot of people in his cabinet, a lot of people in the Senate that are going to be like, maybe we shouldn't do this,
well, he
and
has
hopefully he'll balance it out.
yeah, he has the unilateral authority to impose some based on like national security concerns. Like he didn't need congressional approval for like the steel tariffs he did. Now, I imagine that national security concern won't extend to tariffing literally everything or even most foreign products. So he might need congressional approval for some of those things. We'll see. We'll see.
Well, another thing that I thought about, like, so let's say he does implement like a crazy 60% tariff of against China. It's the way I see a tariff like that is that he's trying to play poker and he's trying to hold out to see if China, the government, will supplement against paying those tariffs, and we essentially get free money off of them. However, I think that what China would instead do is figure out how to channel all their products through other countries and get it here because it would be a lot cheaper than having to pay a 60% tariff.
Um, I mean, I guess the issue is like I don't know if Trump actually fully understands what a tariff is, and I don't even know if the economists around him fully understand what a tariff is. Like there were reports that the economists surrounding Trump that he chose for his team or whatever like don't understand the equation for GDP, which shows to us as like subtracting imports from GDP. When the reason we do that is because imports are invisibly included in the first three components of GDP, and we subtract imports at the end to make sure their net effect is zero. They don't actually take away from GDP. And it seems like Trump's economists don't understand that. I've never seen Trump accurately describe what a tariff is. He might actually think foreign nations pay them, or maybe he's just lying about it when he talks to people. Um, so I don't.
Yeah, I'll
I
be
mean,
honest. Go ahead.
I
Go
don't
ahead.
disagree that like tariffs can or when tariffs are implemented, like people can try to get around them. This happened like in Israel, like when Turkey tried to stop people from exporting to Israel because they didn't like what Israel was doing. They just moved to different ports and got around it completely. Um, but I think it's part of the reason Trump has said he's open to tariffing literally everybody. So
What I think would be really funny is if China all of a sudden starts making amends with India and starts transporting all their shit through India because they have like some really strong like port trades and shipping yards. So I think that would be an interesting thing to see
yeah,
come out of this. Uh, but yeah,
I'm
so
Did you have
I
you
want
ever read anything about the effects on farmers from Trump's original tariffs?
no, I have not.
So when Trump originally put his tariffs up on China, the steel tariffs and aluminum tariffs, China put up their like reciprocal tariffs against U.S. farmers, against U.S. like corn and soybean farmers. I think were the main people affected. And you know, this a lot of these farmers couldn't export to China anymore, and China was buying their shit from Argentina and Brazil. And we had to spend $30 billion subsidizing these farmers so they wouldn't go bankrupt because of these tariffs. Trump did eventually we did eventually get China to like sign a waiver negating these tariffs. But by then there's like economies of scale that get built up as well in other countries. So now like Argentina and Brazil have an advantage because they built up their economies of scale, and now we're behind. So
Yeah, it's so the only question that I would have, so during the Obama administration, what was the what's it called? Yeah, you just said the word, but I'm blanking out.
tariffs? What?
No, it's so the on the farming, having the government
The farming
subsidize.
subsidies?
Yeah, the farming subsidies. The farming has always been subsidized, but from the government. So I'm just wondering, what is the difference between Obama's administration and Trump's administration on that
Well, the
deficit?
farming has always been subsidized to some degree, but we had to start subsidizing them more. We had to take money from, I forget the exact name. It's the CCC. I forget what that stands for, but it's meant to fund like agricultural like research, and we had to start giving them more money to make up for the fact that they were losing so many exports to Brazil and Argentina.
Yeah, yeah.
But
It's
yeah.
essentially it comes down to like my original interpretation of like tariffs is kind of like a poker play. It's a tit for tat. You know, it's other countries could put tariffs towards us. We could put tariffs towards them. Maybe we'll pay the terrorists. Maybe they will pay the terrorists. It's all kind of a bluffing game and just seeing who yields. You know, so
Um,
it's
yeah, again, I don't really trust Trump to be the person to do that, and also I think
of course.
tariffs harm primarily us. Like we even on China, which is they're willing to subsidize their exports. Like it's I think we have studies on this actually. Well, I know we have studies on this actually. Like China was willing to like reduce their pre-tariff price by like 1.5% when we did a 20% tariff. So we're still paying 18.5% more, which means the incidence falls 92% on us. And China's the country most willing to subsidize their exports. And then also like if China's using their taxpayer money to subsidize exports and we reap the benefits, then like I don't really have a huge problem with that. Who knows how long they're even willing to keep that up. So
Yeah, I would agree with you. I probably wouldn't trust Trump with the tariffs either. Generally speaking, I'm actually not really. I don't trust the Fed, and I don't really care about the presidency. I think when it comes down to it, the only federal seat that really makes a difference within your general area or your where you live is your congressman.
kind of,
That
yeah.
has it's honestly been the most effective because they're the ones who try to get government grants and funding for particular projects within their area where they need the need the funding.
Yeah, I don't think the president has a super big impact on the day-to-day life of a lot of people. I mean, obviously, tariffs would be an example. I do think they actually have probably one of the bigger impacts because that can directly increase prices. Um, but there's a lot of things I think the president doesn't have as much control over as you're just your congressman or local community. But
But yeah, it's I guess that's all I really had to talk about. I just kind of want to like pick your brain at that
yeah,
on the trades. So
I think that's one of the I'm gonna read more into it a little bit, but I know there was like a study on this before. It's also just like even if we don't like it, we're probably gonna agree here. Like government regulation oftentimes like isn't even the best ways to deal with these problems. And I think we actually have data on this from India where like they tried to ban child labor and they found out like, people continued doing it. It just became more dangerous or whatever. So government regulation isn't even always the best way to solve this stuff, unfortunately.
that would be interesting to go up against because there are programs where government intervention actually is beneficial. Like the example I could bring up here is OSHA. You
Well,
know,
well,
it's
I'm not. I mean, to be clear, I do think there are cases where government regulation can be beneficial. I just think that generally, I mean, the government can have externalities the same way the market can have externalities, and also the government suffers from like a lack of information. Like, yeah,
That's
and
true.
there are, yeah, other issues. Yeah,
All right. Well, it was nice chatting. I'll let you continue on with your reading.
for sure. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't read this yet, but I'll read it at some point.